welcome back to Canada. Today we've got a really awesome build as we fill in the east shore of the peninsula along Liverpool Road and also finish off a few key areas that we hadn't quite finalized yet, such as our waterfront park and ferry terminal. We also greatly expand the Pacific Bike Trail. It's been a while since I last posted a video and I'm sorry for that as it's been a rough couple of weeks. Before we get into the build, I also just thought I'd let y'all know that I've opened up a Discord server which is linked down below. And as always, if you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so on my Patreon, which is linked down below. Anyhow, let's get into the build. So today we're just going to start off by finishing up Lyon Mackenzie Park, which is what you just saw in the background of the introduction. We actually built that way back in episode 4 and also worked on its promenade portions in episode 7. I put a cluster of trees at the point here, and now I put a nice circle of stumps for seating or maybe as a cool place to visit on a field trip. Now the majority of what we've placed in the park has been very specific in its purpose, being seating or gazebos or a war memorial. So for the remainder of the park we'll be leaving it mostly open, and we'll be using a lot of these weeds to give it a more grassy feel. There is a lot of park left, and all of that will be a large open area right in front of those 3 condos and the tram stop that will be basically the main open space of the park. These open spaces allow people to throw a frisbee around or kick a ball, and they really do serve a very diverse purpose in that almost anyone can get use out of it. For the large area, I've also placed a bunch of alder trees just for shade and then some benches near the water. Now I'm just figuring out the bike infrastructure here, and the Esplanade bike path ends up meeting with the trail here by the terminal, which comes from a bridge over that high traffic area. So I'm just going to make this a park, which you'll see me build later on into the video. After that, I quickly finalized the tram end loop here at the end of the Pacific line, and since the terrain here is wonky, I made the tracks elevated after the stop, which also let me fill in the middle with some greenery, and then I left the rest of the pavement exposed and worn, which worked surprisingly well. After that, I just filled this lot here with some parking and then used planters so that I could more effectively work with the irregularity of the spot and the buildings infringing on it. For this little spot here by the trail, I didn't want to just fill it with trees, so I put some doors on the condos and some paths connecting to the sidewalk. Then I set about detailing the entrance to the ferry terminal with some yellow curbs on the outside of the road. And maybe later down the line I'll have an underground metro line that ends here with the station entrance on that pavement island. But for now I just put some benches and trees on it. Then I used intersection marking tool and traffic manager to effectively convert that parking lot road into a one-way loop. And I'll also eventually add PO signage like I have on my metro and tram stops, once I've actually figured out how extensive my ferry network is going to be. After that, it was just a matter of placing trees wherever a tree was necessary in this area. And then just to finish off this area, I placed a little restaurant and patio on this exposed bit of pavement here, and I really do need to download better fence networks. Then to finish off the ferry terminal, I went with some very simple detailing on the pier/platform, because it is just a platform. If people want to wait inside, they can, and most probably will, so I just put some yellow lines on the edges and then some benches and trash cans for those willing to wait outside, and then some lifesavers for those dumb enough to fall in. As for my ferry network as a whole, I'm not sure if I should just have it go across the inlet or have a genuine network of ferry terminals along the coastline. But we'll just end up having to cross that bridge when we come to it. For this area here, I'll just be putting a park because the waterfront and bike trail after that is basically just a road. And for the shoreline, I put some rocks and then a bunch of weeds and shrubs on top of those rocks, and the effect and look is perfect. I added some loose tetrapods as well, which may be a bit unrealistic, but definitely cool. And then I put a bit of a pedestrian path running through the park in addition to the pre-existing bike path. And then I added my trees. I wanted this park to be pretty heavy on the tree cover, as it is something that the majority of traffic will just be cyclists biking through. But I did make sure to leave a bit of a clearing so that you can actually see the water from the trails. I also made a little area that was like an actual park with tables on the inside of these arcs, where I basically just followed the same style as Lyon Mackenzie King Park, with the big trees for shade and then weeds on the ground. You've just seen me place the condos for this block here, and I've gone with low to mid rises because there are a lot of high rises next to it, and a shorter block does balance things nicely. Now here I'm just finishing off the main portion of the Esplanade, and on this block the buildings interact a bit more directly with the park spaces, as there are commercial buildings on this path here, and I've placed some patios and benches so that people can eat outside. So in this area it's a bit less about the parks and more about the commercial space, so the trees didn't really have to have any clearings or anything, and instead just served to keep the area green. I will also be placing a bunch of these flowering pear trees on this and just overall around the neighborhood. I placed a quick little fountain plaza on that corner just to add a bit of character to the area. And now over here I'm making a little playground, and I just put some slides and play frames and then some seesaws. And then I put a fence, some sand, and then some seating for the parents. And it's just a pretty complete playground, and I also put some planters and large trees to separate it a bit from the road and the cars on said road. Now I'm placing a bunch of condos before I go back and detail it all, so I'll only really go into detail once I go back and work on them. But the most notable building are these blue glass ones here that I placed twice, and they took me like 30 minutes to procedural objects to a point where I was pleased with them. As for this block here, I've got a few low density buildings in there just to add a bit of variability to the area, and I'm really pleased with this block because it does work really well with the elevation differences. Now back to the high effort condos. I'll be putting a bit of Esplanade here in a very similar vein to the ones across the street. So I'll have some commercial spaces with tables along the concrete paths, and then some trees with flowering pear trees at the edges. The only difference being that I actually included some usable space among the trees with just some stumps like earlier. And these awning props really do serve to make any mixed-use building far more convincing. Now we're on to my personal favorite build of the episode, being the Liverpool Hotel, which is these 10 buildings right here. This block is at the edge of Ottawa Hill, so there are some significant terrain differences, which I've handled through retaining walls. For this condo, I merely used the retaining walls as an opportunity to give it a more adequately scaled doorway. And as for the hotel here, I've used this retaining wall to make a sort of terrace that, as a result of how low-rise the buildings in front are, will end up getting direct waterfront views. I've placed some grills and then a pool and then some tables and some greenery. And this area does work quite well, and the hotel does have some amazing views as a result of its elevated position on the hill. I've replaced the elevated road I had with another road with parking and brighter bike lanes for the shoreline, and also expanded the width of the peninsula a bit so that I can fit in buildings and parks. For this block here, I placed this greatly shrunken Dubai condo by Reaper as the only real high-rise, and then next to it a condo with two pretty short towers and a gap in the middle to preserve the view from the Liverpool. The neighboring block I simply filled with a bunch of Smiley's condos. Now I'm just doing this east shoreline proper with some rocks and greenery and sparse trees. And this is just mainly so you can bike or drive along East Shore Boulevard with a clear, unobstructed view of the water. Speaking of East Shore Boulevard, I had to add some yellow curbs in the middle of the roads to keep it nice and authentic to North America. Basically, the last thing I did this episode was fill in all of these empty spaces along the East Shore with a lot of greenery and park spaces, especially considering that the waterfront proper across the boulevard didn't really work that well as a public space. For this park, I used some pergolas and benches to make it a better park, and then I just put in some trees. The next park over just had a fairly standard gazebo in the middle of a sort of X of paths, with some more trees running behind the building. These parks are pretty low effort because they're fairly small and don't really need to be anything more than they already are, and they do function very well to create a nice tree line when the city's viewed from the water. That is basically it for today. I do hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like or subscribe. If you have any questions, comment them down below, and if you just want to chat about Skylines or really about anything, I have a Discord now, and it's linked down below as well. If you want to support my channel even more, you can support me on Patreon and enjoy a host of benefits. And as for future videos on this channel, the next video will probably be a top 10 mods sort of video. And then after that, maybe I'll try live streaming some Canada. And the next episode proper of Canada will be finishing up the Peninsula with Crowdpoint. So if you want to watch any of those episodes, don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching, and have a great day.